So it has been a very slow news week, especially in comparison to what we've seen in the previous few weeks, especially last week with Zelensky's trip and that kind of thing. But when it's a slow news week, now you have to fight with narratives because there's not a lot so much to report as much as to turn up the volume on narratives. So, for example, I see this with the New York Times. Kiev and Moscow began the year with lofty ambitions in the war in Ukraine, but after months of grueling combat and heavy casualties, the front line remains largely unchanged. Okay, so now you're starting to hear from the trolls, you're starting to hear from the repeaters. See, Moscow has gained more ground this year than Kiev has, and they're losing ground, right? Comparatively. Okay, well that comes from somewhere. Before I talk about how to address that, let me talk about this. The slow news week is bad in the sense of if something doesn't change soon, it's going to get into what we're worried about as being more of a frozen conflict if last year is any indicator of this year. Now, Ukraine's going to keep pressing on, but the weather is going to have an effect. This is the Wikipedia page for Ukraine. Winter stalemate, attrition campaign, and military surge. When did it start? 12 November through June 7th. So the idea is that we only have a limited time. It's right now as I speak, it's 29 September. It's closing in on you don't have a lot of time to take ground. So let's talk about the ground. Um, Overall, this is the drive. Okay, so here's the New York Times article, which talks about it, but here's the drive. While in Ukraine made small gains in the south, Russia took slightly more land overall, mostly in the northeast. And I see this again and again with Russian repeaters talking about Russia's taken more land. They've taken twice as much square miles this year than Ukraine has. Yeah, but since when? Like, so look at the map. Okay, so you can be informed. Here's February. Here's how much ground Russia took. Here's Russia in March. Here's April. Here's May, June, and not a lot has happened for Russia since then, taking ground where uh, Ukraine rolled it back, rolled it back. Here we have September, the Kharkiv offensive, and then pushing them out of Kherson, right? This is the withdrawal from Kherson, and then it's been pretty slow on the amount of ground ever since. And there's not a lot of territory gained. So when you hear that, it might be better to say what's happened since the counteroffensive, but it's still not a lot of ground, and that is going to dampen the enthusiasm. So when you're looking at like when are people going to be most supportive? Right? They're going to be most supportive when they can see some wins. So seeing wins like the Black Sea, the sub, the headquarters, those kind of things are going to be more important. Measuring just yards on the ground is you can choose any metric that you want as far as who's winning. But like in Vietnam, McNamara selected body count, but that wasn't a winning strategy to just measure that. There are more factors at play. Okay, so here's the next story, attack on Russian energy. So you're starting to see more attacks on Russian energy. We're in the news, we're seeing more about Seymour Hersh's nutty ideas about Nord Stream and some other things. And Ukraine has attacked oil depots, and they might even go after the electrical grid in Russia. I think what Ukraine really needs to do, and it might be beyond their capabilities, if they really want to cripple Russia, stopping their oil production, seizing their oil production, some kind of attack that's going to set an oil well on fire or something along. I know that's an environmental problem, but something that's going to stop that would seize up the economy that's so dependent on that. Russia has changed their supply chain radically in order to be able to ship their oil to other places, India and China and other places. But to be able to blunt that, that's where the action would be if they're going to actually have an impact on that. So, okay, next article. Russian. So I'm talking about supply chain, right? And it triggered another idea. Russia has a hard time sourcing parts for their drones, for their missiles, for things along those lines. And they've lost, according to the British intelligence update, 90 fixed wing aircraft. Now, what does that mean? 90 fixed wing aircraft. You don't see a lot of Russian planes in Ukraine. They stay in Russia, far away, shoot their missiles, and they go home. Okay, they lost 90 out of 900, and of those, it's hard to determine how many of those are being cannibalized or absorbed or used more than their lifespans, their airframes lifespans more quickly than it was planned for, that kind of thing. So logistics are going to have a big impact on winning the war. That's why I talked about going after oil at the source. That's why if you can reduce the aircraft, where else are they going to get the aircraft from? They can't home grow it anymore because of logistics. Okay, next story. Putin signs a decree allowing Ukrainians to enter Russia visa-free. This, I understand what they're trying to do is trying to Russify Ukraine, like draw them into the fold. This sounds to me like if you saw a headline that said, Ukraine says, Russians, you can come across the border visa free, you'd say, that's nuts. Well, this is nuts. Okay. These passports don't even have to be valid or up to date or anything along these lines. These documents are allowed to enter the territory of Russia, even if the documents have expired. And this was in Pravda. I'm not making this up. Like this, this was a story in Pravda. I would imagine they'll have to exchange those passports for Russian passports, but I bet that'll be a small price to pay for people who are going to get over the border in order to sabotage, oh, I don't know, things that are important. And so that'll be interesting to look forward to. Seems like a not so smart policy to me. Okay, Ukrainian soldiers are heartened by the idea of Abrams tanks being delivered, but there's something in here that made me think about this. Mark Miley. It's not about the Abrams here, it's about Mark Miley. Well, his last day at the Pentagon was yesterday. The new guy is General Charles Brown. Now, I don't know a lot about Brown. I started researching him, but I can't really fully comprehend his resume because I'm not Air Force, right? So I asked Jake Bro in my community tab. I said, Jake Bro, I was going to review General Brown's background, but I'm hoping to persuade you that you should do it since you have the Air Force experience and therefore you're better equipped to interpret his resume. I don't know, what I don't know. A man's got to know his limits, right? But Jake would be a better guy. Pester Jake to ask him to tell us more about him if you would. It's at Jake Bro, at JakeBroe. I think he's the right guy to be able to give us a good sense of what this guy's going to be like. I can tell you this. He was a Trump appointee to become the chief of the Air Force. And so if we get to a scenario where Trump is president again, I'm not saying that it will be or wishing that it would be, but if we get to that, though, hopefully he'll have more sway over Trump than not since he was his appointee for the Air Force. Okay, next story. So the special military operation, Jake talked about this yesterday, the special military operation in Ukraine will last at least until 2025, says Shogu. And this was in the Kyiv Post. And this was in part of the meeting with the Sokolov with the pillow. And Sokolov's another interesting case. Like, I didn't even talk about him. I don't think this is just bonus beyond the 7 that I was talking about. I don't think that he's alive. If I was a betting man, I'd say he's dead. But how long can you really put this out and pretend that he's still alive? It's just an odd thing to see. Okay, at any rate, so won't end until 2025. So, but everything's going according to plan, as they say. But it was supposed to be a 3-week kind of event, right? Now, if you take 3 weeks, let's look at February 24th, 2022 until January 1st. Let's put the best face on it. It's going to end on New Year's Day of 2025. That's 1,042 days of the war. Okay, he said it's going till 2025. So January 1st would be 1,042 days. You know what that is in 3 weeks? Because the special military operation was only supposed to last 3 weeks. That's 49.61 3-week special military operations, but everything's going according to plan. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, Putin never said it was going to take 3 weeks. Yes, you can see documents that say that. In fact, he said he'd be able to take Kyiv in 2 weeks, according to Time magazine back in 2014. Right? He thought this was going to be over. He thought it was going to be like the one-day war in the place I can't pronounce between Azerbaijan and Armenia, right? That one-day war that he thought it was going to be over lightning quick, but yet here we are 580 some odd days later. And that's the stories that you need to be understanding this week. Even though it's a slow news week, you need to be understanding what's going on. One more thing, I want to thank you for those of you who have gone and followed me on Rumble, not because I'm trying to get you to watch it there, but because I was number 17 when I put out an announcement yesterday. I was tied with 14th place. If you just type in Ukraine, if you're looking for Ukraine news, I was 14th. I've now displaced. I was tied for 14th this morning. I'm now 13th. And so the reason that I'm asking you for that is because it's simple. I want positive voices about Ukraine to come forward if anybody's looking for anything interested in Ukraine. Hey, thanks for your time. And if you are on Rumble and you can help me, I'd appreciate it. If you're not, don't worry about it. That's okay. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.